have to say that I'm actually shocked. When López Obrador was elected, I thought that at minimum, the one thing that he would be like would be very nationalistic when it came to migration. He spoke at the beginning of his, when he was elected, and then when he became president, he was at first very welcoming with Central Americans and so on. But I'm actually really shocked that he has been so not very responsive to Trump, not very demanding of Trump of what he might do money for. One of the things you just mentioned about maybe, right, the U.S. keeps sending people back to these towns, to Tijuana and Reynosa and El Paso, and Ciudad Juárez and so on, and they're not asking for money. The Mexican government doesn't get any money from the American government. So what is happening? What's happening is it's a complete chaos. It's very chaotic. The cities are doing what they can, and mostly, I think, it's just the NGOs, organizations that are on the ground that are trying. I know because I have friends on the ground trying to get people to ask for asylum and so on. But it's a mess. I mean, there's no money. There's very few resources that people have. And I'm just shocked. I really am, as to why the Mexican government has not demanded something. And maybe I can ask you. I mean, you live in Mexico, both of you, Doctora Núñez. And you, Tomas, and why hasn't the Mexican government? I really don't know. I'm really perplexed as to why. That's the one thing I expected that López Obrador would be very clear about. So I don't know. Do you have an answer to that? I don't know if you can tell me.
And I would like to put on top of that López Obrador from the very beginning decided to get out of the Mérida Initiative. And supposedly that the funds would come to the development of Central America, but nothing has happened of substance either. So Silvia and Tomas, it's interesting to get your perspectives from Mexico.
Well, I believe that although it cannot be called as an agreement between Mexico and the United States, there is an agreement, and that agreement linked, unfortunately, trade to migration and security. We need to understand that the linkage between migration and security for America is going to stay for a long time. While there are threats to America, they are still going to link migration to terrorism or any threat that newcomers might introduce to the United States. And this is so unfortunate that the Mexican government was so desperate to start reinforcing the renewal of the NAFTA and now TEMEC, that this opened the door for Donald Trump to create this situation. It's if you want trade, which Americans also wanted the trade, of course. You will still have to do the dirty work with migration. But in fact, since the Peña Nieto presidency, we were already doing the dirty work, because in the Obama presidency, the number of deportees, the number of deportees that Mexico sent to Central America was much larger than the ones that the US sent. But this was because of an agreement between politicians. And the situation became much delicate for Mexico when the Mexican government decided that it is okay. We will enforce even the military, in order our military to inhibit migration into the United States. And nothing happened to the ECLAC proposal to provide for the development not only of southern Mexico, but the northern triangle. And whenever we talk about this situation, we need to understand that if we do not incorporate to this dialogue or this conversation the three governments of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, nothing is going to happen, because it is not a matter only of Mexico and the United States. And I think that it needs to be addressed as an hemispheric situation, because we cannot forget that Venezuelans are also leaving Venezuela for political reasons, not migrating in big numbers to Mexico, but to countries such as Colombia and Peru. And the whole situation of migration in this continent needs to be addressed at least hemispherically.
In my case, I am really worried about one single thing. Mexico has given all in return of nothing.
Yes.
As you know, Mexican government has made more presidential Donald Trump. We have give them, for example, we are now Mexico. We are the Donald Trump's world. We have put many militaries in our frontiers. And what we have in return, we don't have money to care about the people who is seeking asylum in the United States. As you know, Andrés Manuel López Obrador and CEPAL try to put a program to develop north of Central America. And also Donald Trump said, no, I don't give you money. I will make my own agreements with Guatemala, with El Salvador. And finally, Mexico, as you know, somos el tercer país seguro. We're
third safe country.
Thank you, Luis. And I have to insist, we have give all, and we have nothing in return. And this is really complicated, because, as you know, how we can negotiate if Donald Trump wins again the presidency, if we have nothing to negotiate. This is what I am really worried. And also, if you let me in some point, in some moment, I would like to talk a little more about this program that is making Mexico to be a home for 60,000 people who are trying, I insist, to be refugees in the United States.
See, I think that's exactly the issue, Tomas, that Mexico got nothing and he gave it all, and that's what shocked me. Doctora Nunez points to the fact that trade was a significant consideration, but given the fact that López Obrador is who he is, which is a man very much about, let's put it this way, very much about principle. So when he decides something, that's what it is. I really don't understand why he wasn't more demanding of Trump's administration, even if it was connected to trade. Surely he could have asked for something. And he just seems to have given it up completely, and then Trump just does whatever he wants. And so I agree with Doctora Nunez about the point with trade, but it just seems that the politician made or López Obrador made a mistake. And even if you include Guatemala and El Salvador, I mean, what he did is you mentioned, Doctora Nunez also mentioned, that there was separate agreements with them, right? You divide the three, and then you get a better deal, and you get a third safe country. It's terrible. It's terrible for Mexico. It's terrible for the hemisphere. And I am worried. I agree if Trump gets reelected.
And it's terrible for the people. But we can see, following on what Dr. Nunez said, that the pressure that Trump is putting now in Mexico to open the maquiladoras, because the auto industry in the States is not going to be able to go back to production unless it gets all the parts that are manufactured or processed in Mexico. We could go on for a long time, but we have a very a nice number of students, and I would like to open now this session for some Q&A. If you could be kindly introduce yourselves, and you can address the question to any of the panelists or pose an open question.
Thank you very much. My name is Madalena, and I'm one of the students in Luis Jimenez, U.S. Latin American Relations. It's my first time taking any kind of Latin American class or migration in general. But I was wondering how come with all these immigration issues that it's happening, especially when it comes to Mexican immigrants, how is the Brazil program not being taught in school? Like, how do the kids or adults like myself, for example, don't know about it, because it's such a strong time in the history of US and Mexican relations. And as, like I said, like all these immigration topic going on, like, and this is not brought up. Like,
that's a wonderful question, Madalena, and I'll let Tomas and Doctora Núñez also talk about it. But let me just say, from the perspective of a U.S. education, one of the reasons why they don't talk about it is because, generally speaking, the migrant experience gets erased in the U.S. classroom, in the American classroom. And in this particular case, it's even worse because braceros were temporary, or at least were supposed to be temporary. That some of them ended up staying here, their families and so on. But because they were temporary, it's from the 1950s and so on. And even though it was a major policy, it gets erased. It has gotten erased, but it is part of a larger pattern of erasure.
And this also started during the wartime period. And there were strikes, and Mexican workers and Japanese workers made a movement together. So Silvia, Tomas, please, it's again something that if it's ignored in the classrooms in the US, I'm afraid it's also ignored in the history books in Mexico.
Well, you are touching a great issue, and let me tell you that I did recently my sabbatical in Milan, Italy, because I'm comparing the historic trends of Italian migration to the U.S. to the historic trends of Mexican migration to America, which I found quite similar. And it was unbelievable for me to realize that not even in Italy, that has a long history of creating Italian diasporas, not only in America but in South America and other places in Europe. Children are not learning about it, and the young generation, they are not thinking about it. So this xenophobic reaction regarding what is going on with new migrants, the ones that are coming through the Mediterranean from Africa, it's quite easy to understand. Migration is not a component of our basic curriculum. Maybe all over the world. That would be an incredible finding. How is migration addressed? Maybe the answer is going to be exactly the same. No country favors talking about the other coming to their own countries, or some of their kinship leaving the country. They do not want to talk about that. And so this is something that it needs to be a commitment to people such as us to start a movement to that in the US and Mexico and in Canada, at least, because we are talking about North American regional integration still in terms of trade. We need to develop a curricula since elementary school to talk about who are our neighbors, and how how many of my parents or friends moved to the United States or to Canada? What does that mean? This is the only way to have a different approach. But I think that this would be fantastic to promote the history of migrants, and all the suffering disappears from the current narrative. And this is exactly what we need to invoke, and also to show and demonstrate that in the long term, for example, the Irish and the Italians made great success in America. And this is exactly what I'm trying to focus. How is it that Italians made it to a transition from being stereotyped in America, considered ignorant, they were considering them during the prohibition, they were the bad guys because of crime, exactly the same as Mexicans, and they made it to a big success, and also created a fantastic movement in terms of interest of Americans to Italy, and Italians also to very interested in the United States. But this is a movement that needs to be created. And I would also like to mention something regarding the situation of Mexico and the United States, and AMLO and Trump. I would like to ask Luis, why is it that undocumented Mexicans, beside the DACA movement, which is a different one, are not organizing themselves in order to exert pressure into the Mexican government to try to get at least something back from the United States, and create a special relation between Mexico and the United States to provide for either residents to undocumented Mexican in the United States in current times. This would be at least one step in order for the Mexican government to gain something in regard of what America is demanding from Mexico to do with Central Americans.
That's a fantastic question. And I mean, it would be great if that happened. I just want to point out to Magdalena, there has been a movement of braceros to try to get things from the Mexican government and the American government. But as to the current one, the people that are now undocumented, the main answer to that question is simply that the barriers to organization are really high for undocumented people, very, very high. The reason is, I mean, the DACA people who are students, who are younger, who tend to be, you know, they speak English, they might be a little more educated than their parents. They are more organized, and they have, there seems to be an easier path for organization. But the older folks, the people, 35 and above, I've talked to some people like that. And part of the issue is education, just simply, a sense of, oh, this is not going to work. This is not, why should we do this? This is that sort of thing, right? That always happens with any kind of movement, any kind of situation where you want to organize people. If there's apathy, or if they think that they're not going to be effective, it's hard to mobilize them. That's one issue. And the other issue is that they're afraid. Even people that want to do something, right? They're afraid. They're afraid that if they start organizing, demanding, they're going to be deported. And the answer is, or part of it is, that their fears are not unfounded. The Trump administration has targeted people, activists of different kinds, undocumented and not, people that work with migrants. And so, it's three things: education, lack of things that they're going to be effective, and fear. And those are powerful demotivators. Those are hard to overcome.
I would like only to add something that is really important. As you know, Braceros programs are part of history, but also is really important in this moment. As you know, many people that are working as agriculture workers are fundamental in this moment for USA and also for many countries in Europe. Why? Because if they don't have this kind of people that work really hard, they don't eat. And this is really important now because, as you know, even Donald Trump has been really complicated or well, he doesn't like Mexican people or people from Central America. However, in this moment, there is a visa that is given in this moment with really important numbers, obviously, to have this kind of people to work in agriculture. And this is why really I think that history still teaching us why it's important to have this kind of programs, obviously in countries like Mexico and USA, and also with many people who is now disposable to work in the United States in, let me say this, in legal meaning.
Thank you. I think Cassandra had a question for you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Cassandra. I'm a student of International Relations at UNAM, and I've been a student from Professor Milton too. And well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for this dialogue. And I'm really concerned about what's happening on our northern border. So my question is like, what do you think is the role of these border municipalities like Tijuana, Mexicali, Piedras Negras? Are these local governments are fostering measures to include these migrants, or are they continuing the lie to exclude migrants from their policies? And also from your perspectives and regarding the thing that Professor Milton said, that we have more than 60,000 asylum seekers in our northern border waiting from an answer of the court in United States. From your perspectives, what are the challenges that these border municipalities after COVID-19 are facing, and how they can or how they should start to face that challenges? I mean, we have to consider that these policies from 2018, 2019 MPP program. So what should governments, local governments on the border should start doing to face this situation? Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. If you let me, I only say that these cities, Mexican cities, are alone to confront this COVID. I have to say that we have in this moment about 9 cities that are in this situation. We have Tijuana, we have Mexicali, we have Ciudad Juárez, we have Matamoros, Nuevo Laredo, San Luis, Rio Colorado in Sonora, and also Piedras Negras, Coahuila. As you can see, many of these cities, for example, Tijuana, and obviously in Mexicali, we have a lot of problems with insecurity. This is why this is a drama for these cities.
To answer your question about what can they do, the answer is very little right now, because they tried at the beginning when this was happening. Tijuana in particular was trying to have a program where they could have an orderly sort of application process. But the Trump administration made it harder and harder and harder. Then the public opinion, Dr. Nunez mentioned at the very beginning, it started to turn. So basically what the cities are doing is trying as best as they can to ignore the problem. That is, they just, they have them in these camps, and they're just, I think they do have some police or something that in some places, not everywhere. But they're not providing much of anything. And it's not like they have that much money anyway to provide them. Even if public opinion was in their favor, it's not like they would have so much money. And the government, the federal government, is not doing much either. So the answer is they're doing very little, but I'm not sure that the cities, I mean, this is a problem that is so huge that it's not clear that the municipal governments could do much more than what they're doing.
Thank you very much, Luis. We have another question. Will be the last question from Carlos Esteban Carvajal.
Yeah, thank you. What's your opinion about the U.S. courts related to asylum seekers? because I think that MPP program or the Remaining Mexico program also compound existing failings in U.S. immigration courts, like intensify negative aspects, including a lack of access to counsel or lawyers, barriers to legal representation, lack of transparency in immigration proceedings, and legal protections for asylum seekers. I'm not keen on US law, but in the end of the day, I think these people have to pass the whole process, nearly all without the benefit of legal assistance that they should have, with no meaningful access to due process in the US. And also about the effects or the impact of the coronavirus outbreak in this situation. I think coronavirus is dangerous, especially with these people. I think what would happen if the virus reached the hundreds of families who are living in a crowded camp in the Mexican border? What about people with pre-existing medical conditions? I think these people is a particularly vulnerable group because they live in small places, in tents, and it's not easy because they are in security and violence climate. What's your opinion about that? Thank you.
Okay, two things. One, there is no question, absolutely, that the U.S. is violating the human rights of the people that are trying to seek asylum. And the U.S. is signatory to a bunch of, treaties, international laws, very, very clear about the right to apply for asylum. It's also in the 1990 law, so U.S. law, which is the immigration law, the Immigration Nationality Act of 1990, which is what rules this particular issue. So the Trump administration is violating its own law, or violating the law, US law, which is very clear. The problem is that migration law has always been, from the, historically speaking, even from the late 19th century on, that on the one hand, the law would say X, but in practice, things have not always been great. And so one of the problems with immigration courts is exactly what you were pointing at, which is that it really depends on basically what kinds of access you have, because they don't provide lawyers, they don't provide any of that. I've served as expert testimony for several people that have applied for asylum. And I can tell you from my own personal experience that it's incredibly chaotic, but the people that I work with were lucky because they could get me, right? Like somebody that knew me asked me to do this. And so, at least they had some help with that, but there's hundreds of people, thousands of people that might not be able to do that. And there's lots of people that are trying to do this for free, but it really depends entirely on whether or not you're lucky enough to have access to free representation, which of course is not many people. So it's a complete disaster. And there's no question that they're violating human rights.
Thank you.
Well, I agree on what my colleagues mentioned regarding the situation of all these vulnerable people in the US-Mexico border. But I would just add up to this conversation, although it is the final, that there hasn't been a specific move from the Mexican government and the U.S. government in terms of to combat human traffickers in Central America and in Mexico, because many of these vulnerable people were trapped in the networks of organized crime, and they truly believed that it was possible, also with some difficulties, to make it to the Mexican northern border and wait till America would let them go in. That is one thing, and the other one is I think that there must be a clear study regarding the way to ease the pressure of all these different types of people that reunites in the Mexican border, our northern border, and they try to move to America in order, for example, to provide a special care for women and children. Let us think about the possibility of having foster families in Mexico to provide care of these children who are either on the streets or maybe in these facilities with no access to medical support and whatever. Also, another way to ease the situation is that it could be there might be a possibility of a greater agreement for people that want to make it to the United States, for those who already have sponsors in America. What I have heard a week ago in the Woodrow Wilson in a virtual meeting, precisely talking about this, is that the US has identified that quite many of these people who are trying to cross the border have already either families or friends or people that are sponsoring them to make it to the United States. So if that is possible to have a sort of a speed way to provide care for them and let them pass to America, because they are going to be living and supported by a specific person, that would ease the tensions. There are in an interesting research that is being done in the UNAM, let me tell you that 13 categories of different people have been identified when we talk about displacement dynamics at Mexico-US border. I'm not going to tell you each one of these categories, 13 categories, and each one of these categories needs a special treatment. This is why it is so complicated to administer. And there is not an easy solution. It is also a matter of money, but I want to express my gratitude to the NGOs in both sides of the border and that are providing for support, and also to advocate in favor of all these vulnerable migrants.
There's one last question from Elisa Lopez for you, Silvia, but her microphone is not working. And she wants to know how much do we know about Biden's positions regarding migration and regarding the processal part of migration. If in case he's elected, what is going to change, what is not going to change?
We need to be cautious because Biden supports organized and legal migration to the United States. Of course, he has mentioned that he would focus on border border enforcement, but he would privilege technology, for example, technology for screening and new infrastructure. Also, he has mentioned that he's absolutely against the zero tolerance actions that Trump has tried to impose regarding, for example, the reunification of families. Biden is defending the possibility for children to remain with their parents if their parents have only minor migration violations. He's also very openly talking about supporting the Dreamers and the DACA movement. So we can expect a different approach, but is not going to be an open borders policy.
Very good. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and we just have a few minutes left for the final toast. And I would like to raise my cup of coffee for a future where the leadership of young women, like all the wonderful students that came to this tertulia, will follow on the ideas of Augustine, of Erasmus, of Voltaire, of Hume, of Jefferson, Kant, about a future of friendship, generosity, a cosmopolitan world, and that will forget the ideas of the philosopher of Hitler, Carl Schmitt, that unfortunately several populist governments are following, labeling everyone friend or foe. And instead of friend or foe, we see each other as human beings. Salud.
Salud.
Salud. Let us toast for peace, happiness, health, and good governance to prevail in these challenging times.
Hey, hey.
Salud.
Salud. Luis, por favor.
Wow, she took everything I wanted to say. Good governance. Good governance is exactly right. That's what I hope for. But more than anything, I really toast for understanding of the other.
Salud.
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 I toast like a letter to Santa Claus. Mexico needs its own migration policy. Mexican state should not be the United States' dirty work. This needs a regional cooperation in migration. And finally, USA should support Mexico with resources to attend asylum seekers. Toast.
Salud.
Salud.
Hector, would you like to make a toast too?
I would like to toast for a world without prejudices, that the Mexicans, they don't have prejudice against American people, and American people don't have prejudice about Mexican people, and they can actually make friends, colleagues, and partners. Toast for that.
Salud.
Salud.
Salud. Thank you so much for everyone. It's been really an amazing conversation. We could go on for hours. Thank you for all the students that joined us, and to be continued. It's a privilege to have the possibility of opening this dialogue between such bright minds in Mexico City and in Boston. Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you, all of you.
Gracias, caballeros.
Un placer, doctora. Un placer. Muchas gracias.